schedule. Welcome back, everyone. Regent Smith noted, and I would like with considerable alarm, that former Regent President David Walsh's portrait has disappeared from the wall of 1920.
Is it out for touch-ups?
Is that why he's not here?
I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen either him or the portrait, which is particularly disturbing. I don't know if Regent Bradley, would you have anything to offer here? Are you airbrushing him out and you in? I haven't seen your portrait here either.
We auctioned it off at a fundraiser. How much?
Well, David bid pretty high.
It was a very nice frame.
Perhaps by the next meeting we'll have a full report on the disappearance of the portrait. We are now going to turn our attention to another important issue that faces this board, the K-12 pipeline. I know this is an issue that has been an important focus of the Education Committee under both Regent Crane and before her Regent Danae Davis. We all know that the future of higher education is inextricably linked to the success and future of our elementary and secondary schools. So let us get started on this conversation, and I will turn the floor over to President Bradley.
Thank you, President Pruitt. We often like to talk about the mission of higher education in three parts: educating and credentialing our students, and carrying out cutting-edge research, and bringing the benefits of both to the wider community. That's the teaching, research, and service triptych. This afternoon we're going to look at what happens before college and how we can and must do our part to help prepare our youth for post-secondary achievement. So in other words, we'll be talking about the earlier part of the pipeline, the earlier stretch of the education pipeline, the PK-12 experience. We do this because we believe in shared responsibility in this realm, and because we understand what higher education, or that higher education and PK-12 are parts of the same pipeline, and that they are interdependent. Indeed, the success of more graduates for Wisconsin, as we said before, depends heavily on the readiness of the state's high school population to come on into our post-secondary institutions and successfully do college-level work. And in turn, that readiness of those high school students to do that depends in no small part on the quality of the teachers that we produce in the UW system. So we are inextricably linked. Our discussions today will focus in on a particular aspect of this relationship, and that's the Wisconsin K-12 Common Core Standards Initiative. This initiative, which is, I should point out, is state-led. It's not a federal government-led initiative, and that's important in the culture of education in this country in many ways, because people don't think that the federal government should be mandating what everybody does in education. That seems somehow un-American to many people. So this is a bunch of states stepping up together, but a large number of them to engage in defining these common core standards. And I think it's in response to a growing national consensus that shared and more rigorous standards are what's needed, and that they will help ensure, if we do them right, that all of our students, regardless of where they live, have access to high-quality education and are ready either for college or the workforce when they graduate from high school, really ready. So in June 2010, State Superintendent Tony Evers, Regent Evers, and the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction joined many other states in formally adopting the Common Core Standards for English Language Arts and for mathematics. The idea is that these standards will provide comparable expectations across districts and across states, and establish clear and consistent goals for what students are expected to learn in grades K through 12. You have in your materials a number of specific questions on this effort that can help frame our deep dive discussion after we hear from our presenters. I guess I'd suggest that we keep two overarching issues in mind as we walk ourselves through this topic this afternoon. And here are my two overarching issues. One, how will this better definition of the bar, if we want to think of it as the bar, how will that help improve student achievement for all students on the ground? Question one. And question two, what is the UW's role in helping to ensure that that actually happens. So to get us started, I'll turn the floor over to Region and State Superintendent Tony Evers, and he will be followed by Paul Sandrock, who's an Assistant Director with DPI, our colleague from DPI, and by Francine Tompkins, who, as you know, is Director of UW Systems K-16 Initiatives. Superintendent Evers.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. I'm just going to have a few informal ramblings here to start out with. But, we'll go down for a history lesson, first of all. For about 150 years, the state of Wisconsin, almost every state in the union, either the state or more likely the individual school districts or more likely the individual schools, or even more likely the individual classroom teachers develop academic expectations for their students. And while that may have served the country well for those 150 years, the fact of the matter is that there is benefit in having some uniform expectations for children at a state level and at a district level. And that, frankly, just wasn't happening, and it did not serve our students well. So we kind of went along that track for about 150 years, and the first attempt to provide a more national look at what students should be expected to do happened with President Clinton, with Goals 2000, as I recall. And as you may remember, at that time, the then President Clinton, promoted national standards and a national test to measure those standards. And he was beaten up to a pulp on that particular issue. And so the notion of having some consistent nationalized context about what we expect children to be able to do disappeared until No Child Left Behind. And No Child Left Behind did not purport to provide a consistent framework around what children should be able to do, but rather let's measure it and then provide accountability structures and helping structures to correct the difficulties. Well, that didn't work real well either, because every state and union had their own standards, their own cut scores, their own ways of measuring, and as a result, accountability was proportioned out in a vastly inadequate and inequitable way. What No Child Left Behind did do, however, and I believe was the impetus for where we are today, it pointed out the significant achievement gaps between children of color, economically disadvantaged children and their peers. And as you know, in the state of Wisconsin, we're one of the worst states as it relates to that issue. So I think what those things did in quick succession was have states recognize that indeed we need to have standards that would be internationally benchmarked against the highest achieving countries in the world, that would be consistent. I always use I don't know why I use Crandon as an example, but Algebra 2 in Crandon should be the same as Algebra 2 in Los Angeles. There's certain competencies that go along with our academic work that needs to be consistent across the country. In addition, our parents are continually becoming more mobile when families move across state lines, and it is unfair to students to expect them, because of a move, to suddenly have to essentially start over, and this further makes it more difficult for us to operate as a country. So in 2000, or I think it was this last July, given the fact that there's no state board of education in the state of Wisconsin, and that I'm an elected official, I was able by fiat to adopt the Common Core standards. One of the advantages of our particular situation.
You don't have a board, Superintendent Evers?
Don't get used to it.
The answer is no, and it works out okay.
So you take all the blame.
I take all the blame, that's right. That aside, in 2009, we were able to adopt the Common Core standards. They're rigorous, they're internationally benchmarked, and I think the most important part is that it's not the higher bar, it sets the message that we need to have higher expectations for our kids. And I believe that that message has to be there. That's part of the reason why I will be proposing, as another aside, that we, as a state, raise our graduation requirements to 21.5 credits. Right now it's 13, which is the lowest in the country. Albeit almost all individual schools do have higher expectations at around 21.5 credits or so. But the fact of the matter is, I think we as a state have to send a message that that's what the expectation is. This comes out of the same playbook, for lack of a better term. Now, is this a big deal? And I would suggest it is. The Common Core Standards effort interconnects with so many other issues that our state is facing, including our role with higher education to provide the highest trained and capable students as possible. But it also connects with the fact that we're developing a PK through 20 data system that we've never had before that will provide rich, sophisticated data to parents, teachers, public officials, policymakers. They'll be there. You won't have to go search it for months and months or wait until some programmer can pull that information out. We will have a rich data system that policymakers, such as this board, can make decisions quickly. The Common Core Standards is absolutely connected with that. It's also connected with our efforts, and we will have someone here today, I believe. Jennifer Thayer will be here. Jennifer, hi. Welcome. To talk about the other part of having Common Core Standards, and that's measuring students' performance against those Common Core Standards. We will be, in collaboration with 35 plus other states, creating a sophisticated online achievement test that will vastly increase parents and students' ability to understand where they're at any point in time. It will also create new opportunities to find new ways to provide instruction to students. It's a significant step in the way as we move forward. Of course, from the higher education point of view, it will provide changes in how teachers are prepared in the state of Wisconsin. I mentioned before the high level of commitment this system has to preparing potential educators. That preparation will change as a result of the Common Core Standards. Common Core Standards and the new evaluation systems that come out of it will also create new systems for evaluating teachers, evaluating principals, including the use of student data in those evaluations. To take that further into the higher education realm, Common Core Standards and new evaluation system and new data system will create new ways to assess how well our teachers are prepared by our institutions. All these things will kind of flow and be interconnected to the Common Core Standards. And finally, the thing that I'm personally excited about, because I talk about it all the time, I'm a firm believer that at the high school level in particular, we need absolutely more. Every student in the state of Wisconsin should have the opportunity to engage in dual credit opportunities to make our system finally seamless, and having Common Core Standards that are linked directly to higher education expectations will allow us to do that, will allow us to have those dual credit opportunities, will allow us to create opportunities for kids that are ready to leave high school when they're prepared for higher education to leave. And the only way we can do that is with a seamless system. The Common Core Standards sets the stage for that. So with that rambling, I'm going to turn it over to Paul Sandrock and Francine Tompkins and Jennifer Thayer. And the fact that they're educators that represent both PK through 12 and higher education, I hope sends a signal to you that this is not just a K through 12 initiative.
Thank you, Tony. Yep, I get to start. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tony. And I'm the assistant director on the team that has all of the subject area consultants. And we have been struggling with that same issue of what does really that phrase college and career readiness mean. This is one project that is really trying to grapple with that. We say college and career readiness. How do we actualize that? You've heard from our state superintendent and from President Riley the historical and the current context for all of this, as well as the policy framework through which we need to examine, is this initiative going to accomplish its goals? I want to just take you a little bit through deeper understanding of what the initiative has achieved so far and some of the implementation issues so that it can indeed accomplish what it was intended to do. It is an initiative of a great collaboration, as you see here, the National Governors Association, the Council of Chief State School Officers, that's all the state superintendents across the country. 48 states participated in the development of them, and 3 territories, including Washington, D.C. And you can see the link right away with that college and career readiness, because both the CHIEV and the College Board were involved in the development of the Common Core standards. And as you've heard, it's very important. It's not a U.S. Department of Education initiative. It's not a federal initiative. It is the states truly banding together to try to answer that question. What is it that students should know and be able to do to make them indeed college and career ready? And as we think about why Common Core standards are going to be good for students, we definitely talk about that college and career focus. Do they have those skills, that knowledge to succeed? The consistency is critical so that we know that it is common across our districts, across our state, across the nation. Because of the mobility issue. And as our state superintendent mentioned, the content is not necessarily what needs to be so different in each district. It's the ability for each student to access and understand and learn and achieve that is the variable. And the idea of student ownership, if we can be explicit about what it takes to be college and career ready in a way that is understandable and clear, and provide the assessments that provide the feedback to students so they know where they are they truly college and career ready, rather than now they hope that they've taken the right courses, they hope that those grades represent college and career readiness. This is a much more explicit description of the performance that is required to increase their buy-in and their ownership. That's for students. So how about for educators? We know that it's important that this will be one of the mechanisms through which we prepare teachers, not just in service prior to being certified, but also the focus for their professional development throughout their careers, to really begin those conversations. It's important that then these standards also link up with all the variety of assessments, local, state, national, built on the very same framework. And this is really to make sure that the educators own the how of implementing the standards. The what is well described. It's very explicit grade to grade. But how? How is it going to be implemented? What's the curriculum? What is the instruction? What is the assessment that is really going to deliver the kind of learning that is described there? That's where the educators can have their ownership and adapt it to the students in front of them. And it is about building that deeper understanding. This is really what we mean by that word, more rigorous. The rigor of it is that deeper understanding. It's not just more algebra or more grammatical structures in English language arts, for example. It really is about a deeper understanding that begins early and continues to spiral through the entire K-12 curriculum. So I just don't pull out third grade and look at that and say, what do I teach now? Where are my students coming from? Where do I need to get them? That's the deeper understanding that we are building. And on that basis, then, we know there is a greater equity in expectations of teachers and on their part, but also the opportunities that will be given to all students to achieve what is being described. So a little bit of the, let's take off the cover and look inside and see what is the actual content of the Common Core standards and some of their organization. What we have been very excited is that the Common Core standards also begin as our conversation in Wisconsin began 3 years ago. The PK16 Leadership Council in Wisconsin, along with Competitive Wisconsin, held a business summit in March of 2007. And the conclusions of that business summit were that students need, yes, deep content. They need the what, but they also need the skills that they need to apply. There has to be a relevant application of the material rather than simply knowing the content. And you see that reflected in this portrait of that English language arts student as well. You see the skills around communication and collaboration and critical thinking, analysis, problem solving. And as you look at that list, compare it also to, I'll be coming back to the mathematics in just a little bit. You'll see a similar comparability with the mathematics list. So it starts with that bigger frame of the 21st century skills, really, and the relevance, the application. And as you get into the specifics of the standards, and as they move along, they are all based on what are called college and career readiness anchor standards. That was the beginning point. Instead of saying, so what should we teach in second grade, they said, what's our ending expectation? That transition point between high school and any post-secondary opportunity. They identified those anchor standards in these 4 areas in English language arts: reading, writing, speaking and listening, and language. And notice how reading is also broken down very explicitly, that there is a place for literature, there is a place for foundational skills, but there's also a critical place for informational text, going beyond what may currently be the content of many English language arts classrooms. Those explicit anchor standards, 10 in reading, 10 in writing, 5 in speaking and listening, and 6 in language, those are carried out from K through 12. So you see the spiral of the curriculum to reach this particular exit expectation. It's not just hopeful that they will, it's very explicit. If you stay on this track, that learning progression, you will get there. One of the critical pieces that was added in the English language arts standards, and you can see it in the very long title, if I just go back, I guess I can. There. The title at the boldface at the top, it's the Common Core Standards for English Language Arts and Literacy in History, Social Studies, Science, and Technical Subjects. They are combined, which says that literacy, while traditionally the realm of English language arts, also resides in every subject area. We want to be explicit about that the same expectations that are coming out of the English language arts classroom need to be the same expectations that you see for anything that deals with reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language in any other subject area. What happens now, we know, is that in grades K through 5, that classroom teacher does that. He or she is in charge of the full curriculum and does that integration naturally. But in middle school, when we start to segment into disciplines, and certainly at the high school level, it's like, well, I think the English language teacher, she's the one who can, or he can take care of that stuff. And instead, the message is loud and clear. Literacy is everyone's business. And those same college and career readiness anchor standards in reading and writing are now laid out. What does that look like in Science 612? What do they look like in Social Studies and History 6 through 12? And then the technical subjects, which are broadly defined, you see, not just as the traditional career and technical education subject areas, but also art, music, and other design applications. So it's a transformation and a buy-in on the part of all educators to be part of this effort. Again, digging a little deeper to show the contrast, our 1998 model academic standards, again, following the national model and what all of the various disciplines were doing, we had grade 4, grade 8, grade 12. And then every district, 400 plus, had to fill in the blanks in between. They didn't do it all in the same way, which led to a lot of inconsistency and variety in the preparation of students as they graduated high school. The standards, the Common Core state standards, as they looked at what do we have in common and what can we put together that would be more explicit in that learning progression, it is grade by grade. You also notice in the contrast, the comparison of the two, much more detail, much more explicit about the performance that is expected. So again, it's not just the what, but how am I going to demonstrate that is more explicitly described. Here is the comparable 21st century skills piece around mathematics. It's called Standards for Mathematical Practice, and then with it is the content itself. K-8 grade level standards are very explicit about the algebra's beginnings in K-8, very specific in the overviews. At the high school level, there's no way that they could, again, say this is 9th grade or 10th grade or 11th grade because students go in so many different directions and take many different paths. So there are conceptual categories instead and some additional standards beyond what would be adequate preparation to enter college coursework for those students who may be intending a major in a field such as a STEM-related field, science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, who don't want to start at the first credit course. They want to start at a more advanced level. Let me share again the mathematical practice. This is really the link with the 21st century skills. You saw the portrait of the ELA student, and this is the portrait, in effect, of a mathematical student, a mathematical mind, a mathematical approach to any issue, any problem. These are the things that continue K through 12, and we hope on into post-secondary. This is what we heard, again, in our business summit in 2007, that students should have these critical thinking skills, the collaboration to reason and critique each other's arguments, present that information effectively, the communication, and the creativity to come up with new solutions and new answers. Notice it's not just about the multiplication tables. It's a lot more than that. Can you do it without that? No. But it's an important marriage of those two elements, the what and the how, the deep skills. You'll also notice a very explicit description of how, again, the content spirals all the way through at the elementary grades, very explicit in these 4 areas, connecting to what you see in 6-8. So if I take operations in algebraic thinking, it links right to the ratios and the expressions and the equations. You see geometry in both. You see measurement and data in the K-5, linking up with statistics and probability 6-8. And these same categories carry on into the high school. I see the numbers, I see the algebra, I see the geometry, I see the probability. So that there is not a dead end in the knowledge. It is a continual progress. And that's a much better way to track student progress rather than saying, well, you just didn't get 8th grade, let's kind of start over again. It's like, I need you to have that base of understanding in order to go on. There is a link in the content here. Again, making the comparison of the old and the new, having only 4, 8, and 12. That's why there's the blank in 3rd grade math in our 98 standards. More explicit and also clearer in what the performance is that students would demonstrate. I want to share that this links up with many conversations that we have been having with post-secondary and K-12 realms over the past couple of years. The University of Wisconsin system and the technical college system and the WICU, the independent colleges and universities, really proposed this project as a way to get a handle on what do we mean by college readiness. If we say that, what does that really mean? And bringing faculty together from all of those 3 post-secondary sectors as well as high school mathematics staff together to say, so what would it take to avoid remediation and enter that first college credit-bearing course? And when the faculty sat down together and independently identified what is it that it would take, there was incredible unanimity. Then they looked at the Common Core standards and said, this would do it. This would absolutely do it. That was their conclusion. It is a very explicit, very clear description of what students need to avoid remediation, to graduate truly college ready. It was an affirmation that these standards are going to be effective to answer that question. And now they would like to move forward and actually illustrate with sample problems so that both the high school faculty and the post-secondary faculty say, yes, we have evidence that students can do these things. Now we should be able to place them more effectively into post-secondary programs. It slides right into that assessment question, which was part of the rationale for Wisconsin to join the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. And you have a description of the model. It was handed out to you. This was one of the Race to the Top competitions. States were invited to band together in consortia. Wisconsin joined the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, along with it's a total of 31 states, and proposed this model. It was funded, and so the work is moving forward. I think it's important, again, that question of how do we, if the Common Core standards affirmed as, yes, the appropriate college readiness to avoid remediation is the answer, how do we give students evidence that they truly are there? And it was very important in this application that the University of Wisconsin system and the Wisconsin Technical College system signed on to say this assessment, this high school assessment, would be used as a measure for placement. That was a very powerful measure. At least you would explore that as how that would be used. So that link is phenomenal, and I think it really blends that standards and assessment piece of how we can assure students that they are truly ready. Here are the 31 states, and those that are in the darker purple are called governing states. It means they made a commitment to this consortium. There were 2 that were competing simultaneously, and some may not end up being in this one, but are there for now. They may defect over to the other one, but that's okay. It's really two great examples of different approaches to answering this question of assessment. How do we really assess these Common Core standards? And there will be 2 excellent models surfacing. Check and see if Jennifer has anything to add at any point. Okay. This is really in Jennifer Thayer's, our Assistant State Superintendent's realm in her division, and so she'll be able to answer specific questions that you may have. But again, another important place for Wisconsin is that Wisconsin was elected, Lynette Russell, our Director of Educational Accountability, to the governing executive committee. So our voice is there. The Wisconsin experience will be there shaping this particular project. And again, what's very important is that it is, as you see on the example here, the layout of the entire project, computer adaptive, so that students are able to be challenged as they go through it. It's a summative test. As you see, it will occur in the last 12 weeks of the year. It is a system of assessments, so it's not seen as simply a single event, as our current state assessment is. It will link with what schools are trying to do with more formative and benchmark data, and truly involve teachers in the development and the implementation of it. It will occur 3 through 8th grades, as is required now under federal law with No Child Left Behind, and once in high school. And I was told that we can say it's very likely that it will not be in 10th grade. It's more likely that it will be in 11th grade, which again raises the interest and the stakes for high school students. Again, as the UW system and the technical college system are assuring, or at least considering, that this may be part of that evidence for placement, again, it makes it more valuable to the student to be invested in this assessment. So we conclude with just the understanding that this is truly a statewide effort, and we see all of these partners needing to come together, and so appreciate this opportunity to be with you today. Yes, it's DPI, but we can't do without the IHEs, all the higher ed institutions, all of you, and all the sectors of higher ed. Next, also, you see the LEAs, the local districts. It's absolutely critical that they be part of the entire conversation about how we move these standards into classrooms. And it's using both standards and assessments as the vehicle to improve student achievement. Professional organizations, the principals organizations, the teachers organizations, the math teachers organizations, our regional CISAs networks, and another whole group of partnerships that are involving not only business partnerships, but Educational Communications Board, helping us already think about materials that would really help the professional development end of this, and a multi-state consortium such as the assessment one. These are the kinds of opportunities that we see we are looking to develop right now to really move this forward. And a question we constantly get asked is, well, if that Smarter Balanced Assessment system won't be in place for another 4 years, why are we putting so much effort into changing everything now? It's like, well, if we would wait 4 years, we would all panic. If we have 4 years to really look deeply at the way that instruction is taking place, to really unwrap those standards, to say, what is it that we need students to do and how are we getting them there, we will be much more successful. And I think there's little doubt that that act of unwrapping the standards and looking at the best instructional practices and the best local assessment practices cannot hurt our current WKCE scores. I don't have research behind that, but it feels like the right answer. And the websites are there for you to follow up. Thank you. I think we turn it over to Francine, and questions might be all at the very end. Got what you got? Okay.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Paul, for setting a great foundation for building as we move forward. My name is Francine Tompkins, and I am director of our PK16 initiatives, and working with UW system administration and all of the 13 UW campuses that have teacher preparation programs. And I'd also like to briefly introduce my executive assistant, Cheryl Wagner, who has been working on the project along with me for the entire period of this project. So the questions that I can't answer, I will be quickly turning to her for some good remarks. This, I guess, is not... Rebecca, I'm looking on here to see if this is... Thanks. Great. Thank you. This is why I love collaboration. I'd like to thank the Board of Regents for the opportunity to talk with you this afternoon about one of the many teacher quality initiatives that are underway across the UW system. The Student Teaching Assessment of Content Area, or STAC, is significantly changing the way we assess teacher candidates. And STAC is just one element of a comprehensive system of assessment that's used by teacher educators. You heard Paul use that phrase in his presentation about assessment system, and that's really critical, that there is no one single assessment on any given day that is going to be valid and reliable and let us know not only where students stand in terms of achieving content and learning, but how effective teachers are. The specific tool that I'm going to highlight today is used during student teaching and documents teacher candidates' knowledge of content in math and science, as well as their ability to teach the content to students. The added value of this tool is that it's also proving to influence the curriculum of teacher education. The STAC initiative began in 2007 with generous funding from U.S. Department of Education and matching funding from UW System PK16 resources. And this initiative grew out of a partnership between UW System institutions and the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. As Paul discussed, the Common Core standards, well, let me go back before I do that. I'd like to identify that there are two major outcomes I'd like to have from this presentation, and that is that you understand how the STAC initiative incorporates the Common Core standards, and secondly, how we are, through this process, promoting student learning by improving teacher effectiveness. And I hope this context will provide us with foundation for the subsequent conversation around practices and policies. Before I get into the details of the STAC instrument, I want to go back and highlight several concepts that Paul identified in the work of the Common Core. And you will hear these again as I talk about the instrument specifically. And those are that they establish clear learning outcomes. And again, the Common Core standards are focused on the learning outcomes for K-12 students. They also create a common language, which is essential for our work, about what students need to know and be able to do. And they are requiring that we create assessments for our students that align with these standards. And as I said, as I explain the STAC instrument, you will see these concepts and how they're applied in practice. Again, before getting into the details, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we began this work. It's certainly no secret that teacher education programs have been under a great deal of scrutiny lately. And as a teacher educator, this criticism is a bit hard to take, but the upside is that we're recognizing that there's a critical difference that effective teachers play in improving student learning. In this effort to improve teaching, many of our national leaders are calling for significant changes in teacher preparation. This quote by Secretary of Education Duncan captures the challenge we face to make teacher preparation more relevant and responsive to the needs of today's learners. He certainly isn't the only one calling for change. Joining the voices are our own national professional organizations. During a recent meeting, AACTE, the American Association of Colleges of Teacher Education, elaborated on this charge to raise the bar by presenting a directive to teacher preparation programs, of which all of our UW system institutions are a member, to provide evidence of teacher effectiveness. And the critical piece here is that evidence is linked to having a positive impact on student learning. This focus on the efficacy with a link to student learning is critical. Over the years, teacher preparation has been highly criticized for its inability to clearly demonstrate, through the use of valid and reliable assessments, that their graduates have acquired the knowledge, skills, and dispositions necessary to be effective in the classroom. Though assessment practices have improved over time, we continue to be challenged to find valid methods to link teacher performance with student learning outcomes. Over the years, there's been considerable debate about what is good assessment in teacher preparation. And while there is still widespread disagreement around specific methods, there is widespread agreement about the limitations of most current methods. And I think the statements here capture the overall criticism. First, the elements of teaching that are assessed lack a consensus of what effective teaching looks like. Second, those who assess teacher candidates, which usually includes university supervisors and our cooperating teachers, are often not trained to use the evaluation instruments. As a result, there's a lack of consistency in ratings. In addition, research on teacher candidates reveal that ratings are often highly inflated. Third, evaluations that are used tend to focus on either narrow, standardized tests of content knowledge or general observable teaching behaviors, with neither approach demonstrating a connection between teaching performance and student learning. Finally, when you have a lack of consensus and unreliable procedures, the resulting data have very little impact on directing the efficacy of documenting the efficacy of teacher candidates, nor are they really able to inform the practices within teacher preparation. The criticism of evaluation around teacher education is very similar to the criticism that's been leveled at K-12 evaluation practices. And these are criticisms that have actually led to the creation of the Common Core Standards, which, as presented earlier, called for consensus around outcomes, clear and common language, and alignment of assessment. While the charge to reform educational preparation practice has been gaining momentum, our UW system institutions have not been sitting on the sidelines waiting for these reforms to happen to them. In fact, at the beginning of this decade, led by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, we have been working to develop, design, and implement those mandates that are part of PI 34. PI 34 was fully implemented in 2004, and these legislative reforms have had significant impact on our practices. I would say most significant is the change from a focus to learning outcomes from what has previously been a focus more on curricular inputs or credit to degree. In other words, program quality is going to be judged based on the ability of teachers to perform rather than an accumulation of credits. We have built on this work that was initiated by DPI, and UW system faculty have taken a leadership role across the state. Since 2006, we've sponsored or co-sponsored 4 major statewide teacher quality conferences. These Quality Matter conferences have brought together educators from our public and private independent colleges and universities, as well as our representatives from DPI, Wisconsin Education Association, K-12 teachers, and other educational leaders. And a major outcome of these conferences has been that educators establish 6 principles that will guide their work. Rather than share with you all of those principles, I attempted to distill them down into what I think is their essence, which is that Wisconsin educators need to be the leaders of reform. And all efforts to improve accountability in teacher preparation must serve to advance student learning, PK through 16. So, what I shared with you are a lot of the driving forces. So the next question is, where have these driving forces led us? And again, as I said, this is one of many initiatives, but the one I'm going to share with you today is the creation of STAC, the Student Teaching Assessment of Content Knowledge. And it is an assessment that is grounded in the content standards. From the very beginning, we are using the common language and clear language of the content standards. Now, let me pause because some of you should be thinking, wait a minute, our project started in 2007, but the Common Core State Standards didn't come into effect until 2010. We've been using the Wisconsin Model Academic Standards, and one of the things that you're going to see at the very end when I talk about our next steps is that we will be revisiting those standards, the standards we've been using to design our instrument, to make sure that they are aligned and the language that we're using in the instrument is indeed consistent with the new common standards. This has also been a project that has resulted from collaboration. Much like the work with the common standards, this was not a reform that was imposed on us, but rather is a grassroots effort. It emerged from the campuses working together, the public and the private institutions of higher education, working together to design a solution to address the issues around assessment. And I'd like to mention that this work really embodies the 2001 resolution that was passed by the Board of Regents calling for all university responsibility for teacher education in collaboration with our PK16 partners. So we're very excited to be able to come back after almost 10 years and let you know one of many practices that are out there that have resulted from your charge back to the campuses. The last element that has impacted this work is this notion that we are going to begin to transform teacher preparation practices. And we are probably a little bit premature in saying we have achieved that because we need to have time to analyze our results and present final reports. But we're very excited about the fact that we actually even received a federal grant, especially during times of great competition. With over 200 applicants and less than 50 funded, we feel that our project obviously was in a very sweet spot of where the nation felt that we needed to go. So let me get into the assessment system. As I mentioned, this is a tool that is used during student teaching primarily. For most of our students that are in the teacher education program, their culminating activity during preparation is an 18-week student teaching experience. So this is a tool that's used during that time. There are actually 3 parts to the process that are not just the tool, but things that happen prior to and after the observation and evaluation. During the pre-observation conference, a university supervisor meets with the student teacher, and they talk about what is going to happen in the classroom, usually the next day or perhaps the next week. This could be a virtual conference, it could be a face-to-face conference, and it could also include the cooperating teacher. The major responsibility of the classroom or the student teacher or teacher candidate, I'm going to use those terms, student teacher and teacher candidate interchangeably, at this point in time is to identify the content standard to which they will be teaching. So this comes back again to the learning standards. In this example, what I've done is pulled one of the algebra standards from the Common Core state standards. And that would be the responsibility of the student teacher to identify that standard. The supervisor will talk with the candidate or the student teacher about what they intend to do during the lesson. That will be followed up by an actual observation and the use of the tool. And following that evaluation, that observation and evaluation, the supervisor will again sit down with the student teacher and they will review the results of that rating. What I'm showing you here is one piece of a more complex tool that actually has several parts to it. But what I wanted you to be able to see here is, first of all, you see on the top the actual standard that's been identified. And the focus on the STAC instrument is to look at content knowledge, the ability, the accuracy of the teacher to teach the content, and the ability of the teacher to use methods that are consistent with what we know about teaching that content. So we refer to that both as content accuracy and content pedagogy. And what I've done is pulled out one little piece of that evaluation process. So again, we're looking at some very clear knowledge. During the observation, if I was the university supervisor, I would be making sure and looking at whether or not the student teacher is presenting, in this case, vocabulary and notation in an accurate way. And I might make some decisions about whether or not that particular observation was relevant, or more importantly, whether or not the vocabulary and notation used was correct or incorrect, whether there were some mistakes used, or whether vocabulary and notation was used correctly throughout the observation. Because of the focus and the grounding on the standards, we really believe that this instrument has the potential, and I want to emphasize potential because it's still in development, to bridge the documentation of teacher effectiveness with student learning. So we really think that this is a major step in that direction. We have work to do, and I'm going to be very frank about what that work is, to be able to get to that point, because one of the things that's going to be critical is that teachers are gathering samples of work that they will demonstrate that as a result of their teaching that students have actually met that standard. So if you go back and think about some of the criticisms that have been leveled about the evaluations of student teaching over time, I'd like to remind you about how our instrument and our process is addressing those. First is that there is a consensus that's been achieved around Common Core standards, what it is that students need to know and be able to do. And what's critical around this consensus is that's what allows for validity. That's what allows us to say that we are assessing consistently what we believe is important. Second, evaluators that will be using these instruments are going to be trained, and that will result in more reliable results so that we can, with a high degree of certainty and confidence, be able to say that if we had 3 different people come in and observe that student teacher, that their ratings would be within a margin of an acceptable range of error or a difference between the two. Right now, as I had mentioned, the inflation is really high. Some national studies look at, on a rating scale of 4, that most student teachers are getting a 3.5. STAC is also part of a dynamic system that includes multiple forms of assessment over time and includes PK-16 student learning artifacts. The assessment systems that are in place that have actually been charged through PI-34 are a variety of assessments that take place from the moment that a student applies to the program throughout the course of their program to the point of graduation. So this is not a one-time assessment. And because of that, because of the increase of validity and reliability, the data can be used to inform practice. So where are we and where are we going from here? Right now, we are completing the pilot of the instrument so that we can gain the reliability. We are also going to be documenting over the next semesters, which will be in the completion of this semester and in June, the kinds of improvements that are taking place in our teacher preparation programs. We already know that faculty are redesigning their content method courses based on what they're learning from the piloting of this instrument. We're going to be, as I mentioned, reassessing the tool so that it reflects the Common Core standards, and we're going to be expanding it into additional content areas and strengthening the tool by incorporating student learning. I'd like to leave you with this quote and with the commitment of not only UW system, but our faculty and the colleges that prepare our teachers to continue to hold us accountable for this work, because we are holding ourselves accountable. Thank you. And I think we do have time for questions or discussion.
Well, excuse me, thank you, Francine. I think that you've seen a kind of a bird's eye view of some of the issues and challenges that we're facing as we move forward with the Common Core standards, both across the whole PK-16 spectrum of education. We put some policy questions for you to consider in the materials that you received as part of the board packet, and I would suggest we look at those, but if we wanted to start with any questions that you might have from the presenters, we wanted to talk about how the Common Core standards will help us address the achievement gap. What are the biggest challenges we're going to face in implementing these across our systems? How can we use the new state assessments and standards to help us with that important transition between high school and college and so on? But let me just start by seeing if you have any specific questions from the presenters.
I have a question, just clarification on the interim assessment. I read the paragraph that describes interim assessments, but I don't think I know exactly what that means. So what happens when a student is found in one of those interim assessments to be lacking? So what do we do when we find out that the student is not coming along as expected?
One other initiative we're working on at DPI is called the Response to Intervention System, and what that basically is talking about when students do take assessments, and especially interim assessments, and are found to be not at the level they are expected to be at, then what do schools do? And it talks about a problem-solving model of determining what are the needs of that student and then identifying what exactly should those next steps be, what types of interventions does the student need in order to be successful. And that's the importance of those interim assessments, so that we can identify what are students doing really well with, but also who's struggling and how can we intervene on both ends, on the very struggling and the very advanced learners. So and then the interim assessments are given throughout the year to see if the students are progressing and making the progress that they need.
Thanks.
Regent Womack.
Thanks to all of you, and I certainly do appreciate this report. It's definitely near and dear to my heart. But I want to make a couple of observations and then ask a few questions. One observation is, if we do not evaluate the capacity of the entire system, and that's K-16, to deliver the Common Core standards, we run the risk of widening the gap of success based on race, class, and disability. So we have to be very careful at all ends that we address the capacity of this system to deliver the Common Core standards, or we're going to widen the gap. The other thing is, there was mention of international assessments, and if anyone can speak to that at some point or another, I would be interested in understanding if indeed we're looking at international assessments, because our student success is not only based on the state of Wisconsin, but it is based on the world, because that's what we're educating our students to where we're educating them to take their place. And a statement, a positive correlation between teacher effectiveness and student learning is Superman. Superman is coming. When we really do look at the correlation between teacher effectiveness, and I'm very pleased that we're looking at that specifically in the area of students with disabilities and how we prepare our teachers. I'm glad that we're looking at high quality performance, how the state determines high quality performance of our teachers as it relates specifically to students with disabilities.
Regent Womack, I wondered if you could elaborate on the first point that you made about the implementation of the standards across the whole spectrum. If we don't do that well, we widen the gap. Could you say more about that?
What I mean is, we've had model standards, and we still have a gap. And now we have Common Core standards, and if we just end up with another set of standards, we're not doing anything. We're not doing anything for the students in zip code 06 in Milwaukee. And so I am concerned that as we look at Common Core standards, and I studied the ones in mathematics, I haven't seen the ones in language arts yet, but our school district is looking at that. If we don't look at teacher qualification and how this is delivered in the classroom setting, and if in fact on an ongoing basis these common formative assessments assess and address instruction on a daily basis, then we're not doing anything. And Tony and I have talked about that, haven't we? Okay, all right. So
my comments, and I might have a little question in here somewhere, but in two areas. One is accountability, and the other is inclusion. Tony and I just were at a meeting where a group of people in Milwaukee were discussing the need to have a summit. And this group was asked to help plan or even verify whether there should be a summit around improving performance and what's going on in that area, particularly in Milwaukee. And it was a really inclusive group of people who were in the room. And one of the things that came out of that meeting, there were two things. One was this view that, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of energy being placed toward a number of initiatives, including standards of a wide variety of sorts. And the question becomes, when you got all of these things popping up, who's making sure that any of this is going to actually move the needle and do anything around achievement gap? How is that going to be done? It's great to have initiatives including standards X, Y, and Z, and P and Q, but who's working together to put all of that together for the purpose of the desired outcome? And that needs to be determined almost before you implement whatever it is. And I'm using language like I'm using because one of my problems with, I'm for setting a bar, I'm for raising expectations, I'm for ensuring that all of our children are prepared to be successful in life. But I'm also very mindful, as Regent Womack just mentioned, that the gap is a crisis issue for us in the state of Wisconsin. And so coming up with more stuff without having some concrete stuff, for lack of a better word, that's going to talk about who's going to be held accountable for what before you launch yet another. Because this feels like more tests and more assessments and more tests and more assessments. And I pity the children if that's the way it's going to come across to them in the classroom, is that yet there's another test. So I know I'm kind of bouncing all over, and that's why I wanted to say that my first question is, what are we doing to make sure that we're holding people accountable, whether it's our institutions who prepare teachers doing whatever, or whether it is the results of what happens with children, how are we adding value add to the equation? Is it just about tests? I'm thinking it shouldn't be just about tests. And are we interested in compensation that's tied to achievement? And, where are those components of the conversation happening at the same time? Which gets to my inclusion point, which is, where's the community voice? I'm not just talking Milwaukee, but one of the other things that came out of that summit meeting was that if we don't do whatever we're going to do with the outcome being that all children can learn and be successful, in a way that gets community to understand it, be aware of it, and buy in, then we're probably not going to make the progress, because it's not going to be all who need to be in the boat rowing in the same direction. So my inclusion comment is, I saw the pie chart, for example, and I didn't see other than the usual suspects. So I'm looking for and recommending that we give some consideration to how do we ensure that all the voices who have been working on these issues are in the tent or under the tent as we progress to whatever the next is. So that would be, so I won't ask the pay for performance, because that's probably a thorny issue, but I do want to put out that we need to figure out a way to have the accountability go with the what. That's part of the conversation.
There's probably 20 questions embedded in there. I'll try some of them.
Okay.
And then my colleagues can also. But first of all, around the issue of accountability, who's going to be held accountable, that'll be far less of an issue than it's ever been before. We will have so much transparent data available. I'll be held accountable.
You're the easy one.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I'm just kidding.
Once every 4 years. Thank God it wasn't this year. Why do they say that? Accountability. Yes. Here's my belief. I believe that there will be so much transparent data that will be part of this system, that setting up systems of accountability in a real formal way, I'm not even sure that's going to be necessary. We will, I believe, within a handful of years have teacher and principal evaluation systems that will have as a component student data. I believe we will have data available to show, it's there right now, how our students in our PK through 12 system, public school system, enroll and persist and succeed or fail in higher education. That, I think we will be in such a rich data environment that we will all be held accountable. I truly believe.
And before you go on, let me just add, I think we also will have data that links that student learning to teacher and principal effectiveness to where they were prepared.
Right.
Okay?
No question.
So that information will come back into our programs in a way that it's not accessible now, to make sure that we're doing the right job in preparing at least the next generation.
Working well.
And what maybe it's not working so well. Sorry, Tony, I didn't want to...
No, and thanks. The other point around over-testing, I think we probably use that term a little too easily. I think students will feel less tested moving forward. The standardized test that we're always going to have will be online. It'll be part of their life. You know, they're digital natives for the most part, except for poor kids, frankly. So I think the achievement test itself, the standardized achievement test, will be almost viewed as part of the instructional day. Jennifer before was talking about how interim assessments are going to work. It'll be as part of the regular instruction practice of that teacher. The lines between instruction and assessment will be blurred, that students, I believe, will feel less tested than more tested. So I've attempted to answer the accountability piece. I've attempted to answer the over-testing piece. I can't remember what other one. Yeah, absolutely. We will. That is a great point. We do need to address that. And I'll use the whole issue of what Jennifer talked about with the response to intervention. Those systems that are being put in place and being put in place right now in Milwaukee as part of the corrective action requirements. That response to intervention, we actually have requirements for Milwaukee Public Schools to, for lack of a better term, train parents around what exactly is it, what is the benefit for you as this data comes out, how to understand the data that's going to be coming at you in more often and with more clarity. So there is a need for that. I agree with that.
Regent Crane?
I think that this discussion and presentation is as important as anything that we have done and that we will be doing, and it must continue. And we have had discussions related to this, obviously, in the Education Committee, but I think it's very, very helpful that this is with the entire board today. I want to make one comment about combining the accountability issue with the support issue so that both our schools of education and the teachers who will be in the K-12, pre-K, PK-12 classrooms believe that success is possible. I think that we have had in the air for some time a feeling that we're failing, and and there's a lot of truth to that. But I think that in some ways it has deadened things rather than been supportive. And I find the kinds of approaches that I've heard today to help, and as somebody who has had some experience in the public school district arena, I think it has an effect on school board members as well as teachers in the classroom. So I think, and then I want to especially reinforce the point that for this group, for the University of Wisconsin system, the importance of our responsibility for the schools of education cannot be overstated. This is clearly our responsibility. Much of the rest is a responsibility that crosses all lines. And as somebody who's active these days in my community in early childhood, I would suggest that we all need to be part of looking at this holistically. And then finally, I just would ask the board to see how many people around the table in slide 16 in the 4th grade math can explain why a fraction AB is equivalent to a fraction by asking visual, I can't do it.
Well, we have some intervention methods. We'll begin the intervention after the meeting.
Regent Wingate. Sure. I just wanted to ask a question, maybe more clarification on the standards and the assessment model. It seems like we talk about innovation in the classroom quite a bit, and when you're talking about innovation and implementing a standards model, they seem like they can conflict, especially when the standards model is very detailed in exactly what you should do. So how do these plans still encourage and foster innovation in the classroom if a teacher wants to, get students engaged in their own learning and do things hands-on instead of a traditional talking head at a blackboard sort of model? How do you still encourage that? And that would be kind of interesting to hear.
All right. I think right here. This is the whole piece of owning the how. It is, the standards are not directly explaining how to teach, how to implement. It says this is the expected performance, and as the example was just shared, this is a different performance that is expected. It's not just, does this equal this, yes or no? It's, how do I get inside to understand that at a deeper level? It implies a change in instructional strategies. And that is really the focus, I think, that we're talking about here. The teacher preparation is about not just the deeper content, that's critical as well, but the deeper understanding of what does it take to help and believe that all students are going to learn this material, that they will be able to demonstrate, not just repeat, not just regurgitate the facts. So it really is, we keep saying the key to all of this change, what I'm hearing in the conversation, is instructional strategies. So thank you. It ties in with the differentiation as well. Thanks.
Regent Schellenberg and then Regent Womack again.
We're talking about standardizing in some ways, creating these core standards, and I'm wondering if that's going to limit flexibility in teaching strategies, because there's obviously some range in the school has a lot more resources than that one. The school maybe has negative influences in the neighboring community, and this one doesn't. So there's got to be some differentiation in how the teaching is done, what implements are used, and I'm wondering how we're going to train the teachers. If we're going to train the teachers any differently who need to be teaching in those more difficult situations.
It's a lot of, you're raising sort of the equity issue now in a different way across schools, right? Not just the resources that they have, that the students are going to be different. And I think, to me, the answer is, again, the teacher preparation. Are we preparing our teachers for, do they only have a single experience that is the same throughout their entire preparation? Or is it that they really get into our urban schools, into our rural schools, they see the variety, they know how to use online learning materials, that they're not just tied to, oh, I have a textbook, therefore I can teach. Is that engaging the conversation more?
You're saying that you would train for flexibility,
Absolutely, absolutely. So when I talk about instructional strategies, again, it's not a single, here, this is going to fit, one size fits all. It really is understanding the response to intervention model, which is constantly, the constant question with that is, what do I do next? When the evidence tells me this student is not learning, this student, not my whole class, my general pulse of the class, but this student is not learning, the evidence is telling me, what do I as the teacher do next? That's the critical question. if that's always focused, I think we'll get closer to, what you're suggesting.
To answer most of my question, I still feel like there's going to be parts of that are missing. That someone is going to have to have extra special dedication to teach in certain circumstances, and I don't think that's something you can necessarily teach teacher education. But I think it's something that needs to be addressed if we're looking to have success and close the gap.
I just want to speak to that point as somebody who was prepared as a teacher and prepared as a special educator, and felt that if everybody would have had the same preparation I had to really be able to look at all learners as diverse learners, that I think we would have been further ahead. So I think one of your issues is right on point about a very different way that we prepare teachers. And I think the other thing that we're always grappling with is this is, a problem that is very complicated, and you've heard a lot of different pieces to this, that we not only need to look at the development of the core standards provides us with a clear outcome. It doesn't tell us how it gets implemented, and it doesn't tell us how we prepare the teachers to implement it. It also doesn't speak about the need for professional development for our faculty in higher education who are going to be working with new future teachers, who are going to be working in these new contexts. And I think those are some policy issues as well, that there are many. I was prepared to teach by looking at the end goal and planning backwards. And many of you that have worked in business have a very similar model. And I think what the core common standards allow us to do is to see very clearly where we want to wind up, and then to begin to plan backwards, considering a lot of the complications that you've brought up here. So I think, like many of my colleagues, we're looking to pull together some strategic way of moving forward. And part of the question that again, working with teacher educator programs, is how do I help better prepare those teacher educators and their colleagues in letters and sciences who are responsible for teaching the content to be able to deliver this 21st century learning. And that's yet another part of a piece of that puzzle.
Thank you.
Regent Womack, did you have another?
Just one final comment, Mr. President. I'm just asking if DPI has also considered challenging the time and space issue of secondary education. And, we are generally educating our secondary student, our K-12 students in a 7-hour school day. And and that's pretty traditional. That was my school day a long, long time ago. And I'm just wondering if we're also, as we introduce this, looking at challenging the concept of time and space as we educate our children. Because it just seems to me that we're just putting something new in the box. And I want us to sort of look at the box. Just a question.
And the answer is yes. One of the things, well, first of all, I have to tell you that, and this isn't a defensive response, but there are many times where school districts assume there's regulations in place that prevent them from doing things differently with time and space, and there's very few things that constrict that. For example, I had a friend who is a high school principal, just retired as high school principal, and I said, Paul, at any given day in the afternoon of your high school, how many of your students are still in that space? He said less than half. They're either out on co-ops, they're out at the University of Fond du Lac, this is outside of Fond du Lac, the University of Fond du Lac campus, taking college courses, they're doing internships. Less than half of the students are actually in the space of the high school in any given afternoon. So we do encourage that. One of the things that we will be doing, God willing, in the budget process is creating a new categorical aid program that will be focused especially on school districts that have less than adequate graduation rates, and providing resources for them to work on this issue of time and space and find different ways to get their students up to speed.
Thank you.
Regent Davis.
In the spirit of looking for ways to jumpstart success of all of this, I want to bring to our attention two things. One is There's an organization new in Milwaukee called Schools That Can Milwaukee. And I also, this book that has been put out by Great Schools called Schools, or whatever it's called, but it's in one book, every single school, K through 12, I believe, in Milwaukee, public and private, and there's an attempt to sort of rate each of the school on a number of metrics. And what that does, in the intention, and it's, it's the first time, is to inform all in the ecosystem, be it parents or the students themselves, to help them make informed decisions about what schools might be good for them, depending on what their interests are, and to come up with a sort of uniform set of measurements by which you can glean. Now, everybody doesn't have the same information in there because privates don't have certain, WKC test scores and all that kind of stuff in there. But it was a really excellent start of giving tools to, in my view, parents particularly, a way to make better decisions about what schools might be best for educating them. The Schools That Can Milwaukee, and I will, full disclosure, I'm on that board. The intent is to quickly get to high proficiency schools in a large number, 20,000, let's say. And the reason I bring that up is I agree, I hear you on the data thing, and when we get transparency of data and all the way through, pull through our institutions and which ones are delivering teachers who are able to, improve proficiency for all children and all of that. There are some schools that we already know are doing wonderful. Can we, at the same parallel track, try to figure out why they're doing wonderful and jumpstart, getting more schools like that? I just, sometimes we come up with new stuff and then I don't want to say we lose common sense, but there's got to be some way to get a momentum forward. Kind of to Regent Crane's point about, and I know I have I don't think I speak negative, but I will ask provocative questions every now and then, just very rarely, actually. But that was supposed to be funny, but So anyway, rambling again. The point is, maybe we might want to look at, are there some thread through examples, because we should have that data already, that we can take and begin modeling how to do the implementation pieces of this set of stuff. Does that make sense, Tony? Do you know what I mean?
Good afternoon. I'd like to address this to my dear friend Francine. Since you're the PK-16 person, one of them, we spend a lot of time in the system looking at student learning outcomes. You mentioned student learning outcomes at the very beginning of the presentation today for K-12. You went on to talk more about Common Core standards. I'm just wondering how much work has been done to align the student learning outcome from K-12 to what we've been working on. System has this. I know there has been some work. Would students coming out of graduating from high school recognize their student learning outcomes and the student learning outcomes as they move to higher education within the system? And I know we started to have this conversation more in the liberal education in Wisconsin promise dialogue that we had going for a while. I'm wondering if it's still going on, and while this is very laudable, are we sure that we're working together on this as long as it's so important to both groups? Are we really doing enough to see that these are working together?
Well, Francine, if you don't mind, I'll start, and then maybe you can add to that. I was going to say, kind of as a closing comment, and Lane, you kind of beat me to it by bringing it up directly. I'm not sure that the students themselves would recognize the learning outcome, be able to articulate them. Maybe they would, graduating from high school, in the way that we articulate what we want to see when people graduate from college. But I think if you think back or look back at some of those slides that Paul put up, particularly when he was talking about what you wanted the learner to be in math and in English and literacy, you'll see, and I think there's no mistake in seeing an alignment there on critical thinking skills, on problem solving, on better math literacy, on communication skills, a very clear alignment with the shared learning goals that we've established. And that's for me what comes from what's different about this, to answer the skepticism I think I heard from some of you earlier about why is this any different than the last initiative that didn't take us where we needed to go. We have been very involved, both in Wisconsin in the conversation and nationally as higher education about part of the conversation about these core standards, dating back to the American Diploma Project, which really came before this, dating back to the summit that Paul mentioned, where we were together with K-12 and listening to business and community leaders in our state about what they needed as products from our institutions. And as a result of that, I think that we have taken responsibility as a higher education participant in developing these standards in a way that we perhaps didn't before. I mean, I think that we, for years, certainly as long as I've been in the system, which is coming up on more years than I want to count here necessarily, but we've been able to see a gap between the students that are coming out of our high schools thinking that they're well prepared and entering our institutions and finding out that they're not well prepared for the work. And we tend to say, well, that's a K-12 problem. It's not a K-12 problem. We need to be part of that articulation about making sure those standards are clear, about working to help ensure that those standards get implemented in our K-12 system so that the students arrive prepared, so that we have an assessment that helps students see along the way whether or not they're prepared, which is why we're so interested in this Smarter, Better Assessment project, and we're so interested in seeing it happen in 11th grade so that students can have an assessment that will give them a signal about whether they're going to be prepared when they graduate or not. Do they need to take that other math course in their senior year so that maybe they will be able to hit the bar when they get to college? And I don't know if I'm probably overly optimistic here, but I think this has the potential to make a real difference that will give us students who arrive at our doors not only with the potential that we can see, but also the real preparation to be able to be successful and hopefully in that way address the achievement gap that we see today. So that's kind of where I would put that. And I don't know, Francine or Paul, if you can say anything more about the learning outcomes themselves, but I thought that's what, Paul, what you presented at the beginning kind of as an overarching view of the standard, that those are the learning outcomes that they're looking for. And I think they do tie pretty well to ours, but maybe, Lane, you won't agree.
Can I just, this might be a bridge to something you're going to talk about, but you opened up something in my head that I think has been bouncing around in there, but I hadn't put together that, in the past, somebody asked this question, we had learning outcomes before. Is it just exchanging different learning outcomes that's going to make the difference? And the answer is no. So we've talked about the difference about these learning outcomes is that they have resulted more from better collaboration, broader-based collaboration, much clearer language, and ultimately alignment of standards. But Lane, you brought something up that I think is sort of the third rail of what's really going to transform this. Until the students own the learning outcomes, until the students own their own assessments and can come forward and talk about their progress based on those assessments, we're not going to reach, I think, the potential of what these Common Core standards can really do. And I think that's going to transform learning and preparation of teachers.
I think what might assist us in this process, I heard you say when you were looking at evaluating student teachers, you talked about evaluating how they teach to the standards. I guess I'd rather hear the kind of language that says if we're working towards student learning outcomes, and I'd like our students to have the same language. I like the people who teach to have the same language as well. And I think if we could move away from this idea of teaching to standards, which kind of really raises some people's hackles, but others insist that we do, but say we've come to agree after much work, looking at much data, getting the best people together, saying we've agreed upon common student learning outcomes, and if we want to work towards those, PK-16, I think that would be very helpful for all of us in the progress in this process as we move through the entire system.
I think we have time for one more question or comment, and that goes to Regent Madison.
And I'm just going to take us in a slightly different direction, and maybe that'll be the downer for the enthusiastic discussion. All of this was very, very important and very appropriate. But the question that I have about preparation is, what are we doing both in the Department of Public Instruction as well as also in the university system as it pertains to the training, preparation, and ongoing professional development of administrators, whether they be assistant principals, school district administrators. One thing is to focus all of our attention in the classroom and create a very energetic, enthusiastic, and well-prepared and ready to go conquer the world, and send them out into the schools, and then find that they are in a system where there is a very inept administration. And all of that enthusiastic desire and whatever goes nowhere, not because of their fault, but because the resources were not there, because the administration wasn't able to work in the right political climate with whether it be their own school board or the community. The administration wasn't able to form appropriate collaboratives in this new environment where you must have collaboratives. So what is anything being paid attention to that group, or is the belief is as long as you have these enthusiastic, well-prepared, energetic, somehow they'll bring along the rest of the system and it'll all work? And so what are we doing there? Or is it something for it'll work itself or it's already working well?
I have a partial answer. In collaboration with all sorts of folks, we've spent the last year developing new content guidelines for preparation programs for all of our administrators. And I don't have them with me, nor do I have them memorized, but I would suggest that the things that you talked about, relationship building, kind of understanding the politics, being a good resource for the teachers are all part of those content guidelines, and I'll send you a copy. That's the best I can do.
And the other thing, Regent Vasquez, clearly our colleges of education have programs for developing administrators as well as for preparing teachers. As you know, we've identified teacher preparation as one of the topics for an upcoming discussion in the Education Committee. Perhaps we could expand that to pick up some of the issues that you're raising. I think they're important as well.
I would appreciate that, because not only in the schools that can, but in other initiatives that I hear about schools that work, while there is discussion about what happens in the classroom, there is just as much discussion about the administrative strength that needs to be there. It cannot be just focused on the teachers, and somehow other things will work themselves. Okay.
Regent Crane, and then we do need to wrap it up.
I just want to support that, and I think that is very much a part of the places that I talk about public education today. Is the importance of leadership is what it is. The people who you have as administrators in a school system and within a school have to be quality leaders, or you don't have the results that you need.
Well, very good. Let me conclude with just a thought, and then I'll thank our participants. This is a very wide-ranging and challenging subject, and we've touched on different pieces of it, from standards to outcomes to assessment to teacher preparation to administrator preparation to data systems, and there's lots more to talk about here. And I think what I'll pledge to the group is that we will bring other aspects of this whole issue of the pipeline back. And why? Well, we know as a country that our democracy will be very challenged unless we can get in the future more of our young citizens up through some kind of post-secondary some kind of post-secondary education and a credential at the end of that testifies to the fact that they are there. And unless the pipeline is sending more students to us better prepared who can take that on and get out the other end at our part of the pipeline, unless we're doing a better job at that once we get them, we cannot get to where we need to be as a country in the 21st century. So this is just a very critical topic, and I think part of the good news here is that those of us in both parts of the pipeline are realizing the need to be more cooperative and collaborative and understand the other piece and not just say, well, that's your part of the problem, that's your part of the problem. It's all the same issue. It's all the same challenge. It's all the same glory if we can get the pipeline to flow more quickly and more fully. And, I started off with some questions about how will all this affect achievement for all our kids on the ground? And that's, I think, a big question we have to keep in the forefront as we discuss all of these issues. I just note that last summer, and this was a surprise to me, I guess, probably it shouldn't have been, but Tony and I were at a joint meeting of the chief state school officers, Tony and his counterparts, and the state higher education executive officers, myself and some of my counterparts, together to talk about these issues. It was on common standards. Mm-hmm. Tony, my understanding is these groups had never met together before, ever. It seems pretty amazing, but that's dismaying at one level, but the good news part of this is, I think, at every level, from how do we put this into effect on the ground, helping and supporting and assessing people who are planning to be new teachers to help the students get there, to people at the offices at the state level are talking about how we do that. So we've got to keep this dialogue going. We'll commit to you to bring other pieces of it back to this board as we go along so we can keep it going here and be part of this wider national dialogue that we have to keep going as well if we're going to get to where we need to be as a country. Rebecca, I don't know if you have anything else, or Tony? Well, let me thank Superintendent Evers and Paul Sandrock from DPI and Francine from our staff and everybody else. Turn it back over to Regent Pruitt.
Okay, thank you. Regent Evers, I did wonder, I watched as you were taking all those questions, I did think from time to time maybe you would like to have a Board of Education. At least blame for some of this stuff, if nothing else.
That's right.
This was enough.
There's some doubt. You're right. There's some cost to be paid for that. I'll now call on Regent Bartel to present the report of the Capital Planning and Budget Committee. Regent Bartel.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Capital Planning and Budget Committee met first thing this morning and approved the committee's minutes from October and took up the following three resolutions which were approved by the committee and are now presented as consent agenda items. Resolution 1.3.B, which was brought by UW-Eau Claire, requests the authority to increase the scope and budget and construct the Children's Center project on campus at UW-Eau Claire. This is a $3.8 million project which will provide a child care facility to replace the existing facility that is located in the campus school and has been for, I think, 30 years. This is a building that will be demolished to provide a site for the campus's new education building. The project's pre-design determined a needed scope increase to meet programmatic and business needs of the center. The site was changed to a more suitable location, and the budget increase was necessary to take care of those particular changes. UWEC student government approved a $17 per academic year increase in the organized activity fee, which began in this last fall. By the way, tuition rates for student parents at this on-campus child care facility will be about 40% less than the market rates in the general vicinity, although faculty and staff will pay market rates This is a mostly program revenue-funded facility. Resolution 1.3.C was brought by UW-Milwaukee, requests authority to seek a building commission waiver to allow the selection of a construction manager at risk through an RFP process for the Kenwood Interdisciplinary Research Complex Phase 1 project. This waiver procedure, you may recall, is something that we have gone to the building commission with increasing frequency because of complexities of construction and timing needs. This project, you'll recall, is the initial phase of a multi-phase major redevelopment in the southwest campus area of UWM, and will provide space for research labs and core facilities, as well as instructional, collaboration, office, and support space. This board has already recommended that for enumeration. The use of a construction manager at risk in this case is necessary to advance in a situation like this where we are particularly concerned with the timing of various phases of the project. It also will permit us to begin funding that is available in 2011 and complete the project with the balance of funding that becomes available in 2013. Resolution 1.3.D requests authority to construct 15 all-agency maintenance and repair projects, all basically utility upgrades at 9 UW system institutions. The total cost of $15.7 million includes $5 million of program revenue. These projects include UW-Madison and UW-Platteville stormwater improvements and various electrical repairs on 8 of our campuses. These 3 resolutions were passed unanimously by the committee, with the exception that Regent Stan Davis abstained on Resolution 1.3.C. And I now move adoption of those 3 resolutions, 1.3.B, C, and D.
Second. Is there a request to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Yes, I'd like to ask that 1.3.C be removed, please.
Okay. Are there any other items that anyone would like to have removed from the consent agenda? None. Any discussion on 1.3B or 1.3D? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are agreed to. We now turn to 1.3.C. Any conversation or discussion about that resolution? If not, we will move to a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is agreed to as well. Regent Bartel.
Thank you. Associate Vice President David Miller reported to us that the Building Commission approved $26 million for projects that we had recommended at its October meeting. And, Mr. President, this concludes the report of the Capital Planning and Budget Committee. With the President's indulgence, however, I would like to make one other remark, and that has to do with something that is in your materials. It is the report of the meeting of the Higher Educational Aids Board, which occurred last week. You have the minutes in your materials, and I just wanted to highlight a couple items in there because I think that this board would be interested in them, and they are particularly significant as we go into this budget cycle. You will note, if you take a look at those minutes, that on July 28, this last July 28, new awards from the Wisconsin Higher Education Grant Program, the WEG, have been suspended, and a waiting list has been established. This has happened in previous years as a result of increased requests for student aid, financial aid by students, and it is much earlier than we would like. We already, even at that time, Higher Educational Aids Board has committed about 130% of the funds that are available for the program. That's 130%. Remember, we have 100% of funds. Now, that ultimately will play itself out, and we'll hopefully be back to 100% as time goes forward and as students go to another school or decide not to go to school or whatever. But we had $58 million of appropriation for this program, and at the end of July had awarded $76 million. This is more than had occurred last year at this time. So we are, it obviously points up an issue that we have to be very concerned about. There is a great demand for financial aid in this state. The second point I want you to think about is that the Higher Educational Aids Board made some recommendations at this meeting to what is called the Joint Legislative Council Special Committee on Review of Higher Educational Aid, Higher Education Financial Aid Programs. This is a committee, a joint committee of the legislature that's looking at how we distribute the available funds for financial aid. What is the best use of state resources in this field? The Higher Educational Aids Board members agreed that the focus of these programs should be on increasing the number of college graduates in Wisconsin. This, of course, is entirely consistent with the missions that we have advocated here on the Board of Regents. But specifically should direct financial aids to those who most need it and encourage and enhance student retention and graduation. Specifically, the HEAB board said that scarce financial resources should be directed to students who have the most need and encourage students who are moving toward graduation. And that need includes not only financial need, but also students who are first-generation college students or from minority or underserved populations. This may not sound revolutionary to you. I mean, maybe you thought that this is what financial aid is for, but it isn't necessarily. There are quite a number of financial aid programs that don't focus on those particular needs. The board also went on record as opposing the expansion of financial aid programs to students attending proprietary or for-profit institutions. Financial aid is going to be an increasingly difficult issue for the state, given the budget constraints that we have presently. And I hope we will always keep in mind, as we're dealing with tuition and other sources of revenue, that financial aid is what many people rely on to get an education in our system. Happy to answer any questions. I'm told by Jane that the minutes were emailed out, not distributed in the packet, but emailed out earlier this week.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Regent Bartel. I believe we have come to the conclusion of our open session agenda. I would suggest, because I know some regions are looking to get away soon, perhaps we could break for 5 minutes, clear the room, if you will, and then we'll come back and go into closed session, or a relatively brief closed session agenda. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Yeah.